Liam's stomach dropped. Wait, what? He took a step forward, confusion twisting his expression. Why was it outside? James frowned. The east garden wall is near the staff entrance. All eyes turned toward Rosa, who stood frozen in the hallway, her hands clutched tightly together. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know how it got there. Liam felt a mix of triumph and unease. Then who did? Before anyone could respond, the front door slammed shut behind them. A shadow moved in the hallway. Someone else was in the house. Everyone spun around as the sound of the door slamming echoed through the house. A heavy silence followed, thick with tension. Mr. Carter's eyes darted toward James. Did you lock the doors earlier? James gave a slow nod. Yes, sir. Everything was secured. Liam swallowed hard, suddenly feeling uneasy. Then someone else is in here, he whispered. Mrs. Carter's grip tightened on her husband's arm. Rosa took a step back, her breath unsteady. This isn't right, she murmured. The man in the suit stiffened. I need everyone to stay here, he said firmly, reaching for something inside his jacket. I'm going to check the perimeter. Before he could move, a creaking sound came from the second floor. Slow, deliberate, like someone was walking carefully to avoid being heard. Liam's anger faded into fear. Who else is in this house? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Then, without warning, the chandelier above them flickered. The power cut out, plunging the room into darkness. The room plunged into darkness, and a tense silence filled the air. Then footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the staircase. Liam's breath caught in his throat. He could feel his mother gripping his arm tightly. Who's there? Mr. Carter called out, his voice firm but edged with uncertainty. A shadow moved near the hallway. Then suddenly the lights flickered back on. Standing at the bottom of the stairs was Eric, one of the newer house staff. His hands were shaking, his face pale. In his grasp was a small velvet pouch. James took a cautious step forward. Eric, what are you doing? Eric swallowed hard, his eyes darting between them. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he admitted. His voice was barely above a whisper. I just needed time to put it back before anyone noticed. Liam's stomach dropped. Wait, are you saying you took my watch? Eric hesitated, then nodded, but not for the reason you think. He turned to Rosa, guilt written all over his face. They were going to fire you, Rosa. I overheard Mr. Carter talking about cutting costs. I thought if something valuable went missing, and then I found it, they'd see how loyal you are. Rosa gasped, her hands covering her mouth. Mr. Carter's face darkened. You broke into my study, tampered with my safe, and framed one of my most trusted employees. Eric dropped his gaze. I thought I was helping, he admitted. But when I went to put the watch back, I panicked when I heard Liam coming. I tossed it over the garden wall and ran before anyone saw me. Liam clenched his fists. So all of this was for nothing. Rosa stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. You didn't have to do this, Eric. I never needed saving. Mr. Carter let out a slow breath, glancing at Rosa before looking back at Eric. You're leaving tonight, he said. I won't call the authorities, but you're no longer welcome in this house. Eric nodded, his eyes filled with regret. As James escorted him toward the door, Liam exhaled, feeling a strange mix of relief and guilt. He had accused Rosa so easily, blinded by his own arrogance. He turned to her, swallowing his pride. Rosa, I'm sorry. Rosa gave him a small, knowing smile. I know, she said simply. Just as the tension in the room began to settle, James cleared his throat. Sir, he said hesitantly, there's just one problem. Everyone turned to look at him. The safe was definitely opened, James said, but Eric never took anything from it. A chill ran through the air. Mr. Carter's eyes narrowed. Then who did? And just like that, the mystery wasn't over. That's a great ending with a strong sense of karma and community justice. It wraps up Karen's downfall in a satisfying way while keeping the tone humorous and engaging. Would you like any refinements, such as making the transition smoother, emphasizing a particular moment, or tweaking the pacing? Let me know how I can enhance it further. It was just another day at the Carter mansion, where wealth dripped from every corner. Liam, the teenage son of the family, had never known a life without privilege. He got what he wanted, when he wanted it, no questions asked. But that day, things took an unexpected turn. When Liam couldn't find his expensive watch, his frustration quickly turned into blame. Without a second thought, he pointed fingers at Rosa, the maid who had worked for his family for years. "You took it, didn't you?" he sneered, ignoring her shocked expression. Rosa's hands trembled as she tried to defend herself, but Liam wasn't listening. His voice grew louder, drawing the attention of his parents. Then, just as accusations reached their peak, a truth neither of them expected began to surface, one that would change everything. And in that moment, Liam realized he had made a terrible mistake. Mr. and Mrs. Carter stepped into the room, their faces twisted in confusion. "What's going on?" Mr. Carter asked, glancing between his son and Rosa. Liam folded his arms. "My watch is gone, and she was the only one in my room today," he said, his voice sharp. Rosa's eyes welled up with tears. "I would never steal from you, Liam," she said softly. "I've worked here for years. You know me." Mrs. Carter hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. "Maybe we should check before jumping to conclusions," she suggested, but Liam wasn't backing down. "She's lying. Why else would it be missing?" Rosa looked at Mr. Carter, pleading. "Sir, I swear, I didn't take anything." But Liam's glare didn't soften. Just then, the butler entered the room, clearing his throat. "Sir, I believe there's something you should see," he said. His expression was unreadable, but the tension in the air grew even heavier. Mr. Carter exchanged a glance with his wife before turning to the butler. "What is it, James?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. James hesitated for a moment, then gestured toward the hallway. "It's best if you see for yourself, sir." Liam scoffed. "What does that have to do with my watch?" "Just admit you took it, Rosa," he snapped. Rosa wiped her eyes, hurt flashing across her face. "I would never steal from this family," she whispered. Mrs. Carter placed a hand on Liam's shoulder. "Enough, Liam," she said, her tone warning. "Let's see what James has found." Reluctantly, Liam followed his parents out of the room, his frustration growing. Rosa stayed behind, gripping the edge of the counter, her heart pounding. As they turned the corner, James led them toward the study. But when he opened the door, the sight inside made everyone freeze. Inside the study, the room was dimly lit, but the open safe at the far end caught everyone's attention. Papers were scattered across the floor, drawers left ajar, and something about the scene felt wrong. Mr. Carter's brows furrowed. "What is this?" he asked, stepping closer. Mrs. Carter covered her mouth, worry flashing in her eyes. Liam, still angry, crossed his arms. "So, what does this have to do with my watch?" James cleared his throat. "Sir, this wasn't like this earlier. I lock this room every night." He paused before adding, "And nothing else seems to be missing." Liam rolled his eyes. "Then why are we here? This is pointless." But Mr. Carter wasn't listening. He crouched beside the safe, his fingers tracing the edge. "No, something's off." He turned to James. "Who else has access to this room?" James hesitated, glancing toward the hallway. Only family and the staff. Liam's gaze snapped back to Rosa's direction. His suspicion deepened. But just as he opened his mouth, a sudden knock echoed from the front door. It was loud, urgent, and it sent a chill through the air. The knock echoed through the grand hallway, sending a hush over the room. Mr. Carter exchanged a wary glance with his wife before striding toward the door. Liam felt his heartbeat quicken, but he masked it with a scoff. "Who even knocks like that?" he muttered under his breath. James opened the door cautiously, revealing a tall man in a dark suit. His sharp gaze swept over the household. "Mr. Carter?" he asked, his voice firm. "Yes?" Mr. Carter stepped forward. The man reached into his pocket, pulling out a small evidence bag. Inside was a familiar gold watch. Liam's gold watch. "We found this near the east garden wall," the man explained. "It looked suspicious, so we thought it best to return it."